Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 3, Halacha 1, Part 2 of this year in the Art Scroll 25b1. Yesterday we ended off talking about what happens where you have a 6x6 patch. That's going to be 6 tefachim. A tefach is, by the way, a handbreadth. And it's trying to figure out how do you maximize Yerukot. That's going to be vegetables that can be planted within this, all utilizing the laws of Kilayim. Keep in mind, we want to make sure that however we're doing this, it doesn't look like a mishmashed sort of field. It's always going to look like everything is going to be distinct. Everything that's planted there is not going to look like it's jumbled together or mixed together. That's always going to be the thinking in how the Tanakama and the Hachamim are looking at the laws of Kilayim. They always want to make sure that it's not mixed together. Now today we're going to be getting into the mishneh that talks about with the walkways. What happens if you have this 6x6 tefachim area? Now there's a little walkway going around it to create a border. Now you want to plant even more vegetables, not only within this 6x6 area, but also within this border area. Now you have a border area because what did you do? You created a little space because you created this walkway. And we learned before that in chapter 2 that if you have like a path or a walkway, that you can include that in the spacing and the setbacks. So now they're trying to figure out how do you get more than that. We left off yesterday talking about Rabbi Yochanan saying in the name of his teacher, Rabbi Yanai, that all of them planted within a 6x6 tefach patch. The maximum that you can get within this patch is going to be 5 species. And Kana says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish that actually this mishneh is talking about the species on the outside of the patch. In other words, that you're going to have a single, they both agree, by the way, that it's going to be 5, that there's going to be a maximum of 5 vegetable types that you can do within it. But the formulation Rabbi Yochanan's going to have is that 4 of the species are going to be within this box, and what's going to be the 5th one is going to be a single seed right in the middle. That way you have setbacks of 1.5 tefachim between everything. And the formulation by Kana and also Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is saying that there's also 5, but the main part of this 6x6 box is going to be taken up by a 3x3 patch of one variety. And there's 4 varieties that are planted on the outside of the patch, on the border. And so that's what they're saying that this mishneh means. Now, the Gemara is going to question this opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and keep in mind, the idea is always going to be that in coming up with this, the Tanakama and everybody agrees that you are not making it look jumbled. So again, they both agree that it's going to be 5. So they're going to question this, and it's going to say in this Gemara, if inclusive of the mishneh is the case where all 4 species are planted outside of the 6 tefach by 6 tefach area of this patch, then the mishneh should teach that in this case 9 species can be planted. In other words, 8 is going to go around the perimeter and 1 in the center. Why isn't it not saying 9? In other words, if you're saying that, look, I'm gonna say that as Rav Kana and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish are saying, as this mishneh is saying, what this mishneh is really saying is that you can do the 5, and that you're doing 4 on the outside, 1 in the middle, and that's going to be 5. But then you say, well, wait a second, if you're going to say that you can use the outside, why doesn't the mishneh say 9? Because you can really fit 1 in the middle and 8 going around. What's going to be the 8? Well, you're going to have small little boxes on, like if you imagine a watch or a clock. One is going to be at 12 o'clock, one's going to be over at 3 o'clock, one's going to be 6 o'clock, one's going to be at 9 o'clock. And then over on the corners are going to be little, 4 little other patches. That's going to add up to 8. The 9th one is going to be in the middle. So why isn't that going to be a valid thing? Why isn't it, if the mishneh is talking about it being, utilizing the outside part of the patch, why not talk about 9? And so, you'd say, well, maybe this is really just proof that it's only talking about the interior part of this. Rabbi Kanievsky is saying about this that the same arrangement can be used for planting 4 species around the perimeter of the patch and can be used for planting 8 species, 4 right outside the corners of each patch and 4 at the midpoints of each side. And basically, what the Rosh is going to be saying is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is asserting that the Mishnah is discussing only a case where the interior of the patch is utilized. This is not difficult because although 9 species could fit into the actual patch, it's forbidden because Isaiah is teaching that a concentration of more than 5 is going to be within the 6x6 patch, and that's going to be unacceptable. In other words, we're learning from Isaiah that you can fit within it 5. And how did we come up with 5 species? That formulation is going to be in part 1 of this shiur, a very clever formulation, either by geometry or by the diktuk of the grammar that's outlined by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But they're saying that Isaiah is teaching 5 in the formulation. And so, how do you get 9? You could theoretically do 9, but they're saying, no, you can't do 9, even if you're planting within the box. Why? It's going to look like a mixed up patch. You're not allowed to do Kilayim where, you're trying to plant unrelated plants all around the area, and it's going to look like a mishmash thing. You can't do that. We need to have rational, organized fields in Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael. Very, very clever. So, the Gemara is going to answer how come they're not saying it's going to be 9 if you're talking about the outside of the patch. And the Gemara answers it. Rabbi Tanchum of Batsra says that, and indeed it is so, when putting just outside the isolated patch, 9 species are permitted. But the Mishnah, however, does not rule that 9 are going to be there, because the ruling of the Mishnah is acceptable even according or concerning a garden patch that is among other garden patches. In other words, in that case, only 5 species can be planted. And really what this is saying, according to Rabbi Tanchum of Batsra is pointing out, is that only 5 species can be planted. And any more than that is going to appear to be mingled with the other species just outside this adjacent patch. So it does look like, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, or also Rav Kana, that the ruling of this Mishnah applies not only to an isolated patch, but also a patch surrounded by other patches. And it could be talking about where, each patch may not be sown with 9 species, according to, this arrangement that Rabbi Kanievsky is explaining how it would be. Again, Rabbi Kanievsky would agree that it's going to be 5. It's not going to be 9. Everybody agrees it's not going to be 9. And the problem with doing 9 is that it's going to end up looking like it's going to be mishmash. So that, when it's planted with this way, there's going to be a gap of at least 1.5 tefachim between the species and of each of the plants and between the species of the 2 adjacent patches. And basically, if you're going to do it this way, where you're saying that it's going to be 1.5 tefach gap, because you're not trying to take the nutrition from the other plants, you can still do 5 without it making it look mishmash. And if you do 9, it's going to look mishmashed. Now, how would you do it if you're trying to plant on the outside of this box, and you're going to be saying that there are a 3 tefach gap? In other words, plant 1 is going to require 1.5 tefach, and plant 2 is going to require 1.5 tefach. That's going to add up to a 3 tefach gap. You can find the diagram of that in the Art Scroll 25b2, but basically they're going to be planted along the corners on the outside of the box, where you're going to be planting a small row. It's going to be a linear row of this vegetable. You're going to leave the middle part of the box undone, and I presume that you would leave 1 seed in the middle, and then that would come up with 5. That's going to be if you're going to be doing a 3 tefach setback instead of the 1.5 tefach setback. Some say that it's going to be the 3 tefach setback, including Rashi, but as the Chazan Ish points out, the the halacha is going to be 1.5 tefachim, but with the geometry, it's possible to organize it either way. Now, we're going to get into the walkway that we were talking about in the Mishnah. So again, we have our 6 by 6 tefach gap. Now, why are we talking about a 6 tefach gap? Well, that is going to be 1 amah. And, 1 amah is going to be the sort of standard for when we start getting into measurements for some of the parts of fields. So there's a discussion in the beginning of Eruvin in the Bavli, if what is going to be the size of the tefach and what is going to be the size of the amma, and it's basically saying over there in the Bavli that the amma that's used and the tefach that's used for Kilayim is different than the measurement that's going to be used in the Bet HaMikdash. And over here for Kilayim, in the Bavli, it's saying that it's going to be 6 tefachim, which is 1 amma. And over there, they're saying that the amma for building in the measurement for the Bet HaMikdash is going to be 5 tefachim. That's going to be a 5 tefach amma. Anyway, they're saying over there that there's a little bit more distance in Kilayim, and we're going to, the spacing is a little bit more relaxed, so that it's a little bit larger, because again, this is a biblical thing, and we want to make sure that the fields are going to be properly spaced, there's not overlap. And also we learned that over there in Eruvin and Bavli that this kind of spacing, all of the spacing and measurements, is a halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai, and many of these rules by Kilayim are also going to be halachot l'Moshe l'Sinai. It seems that in fact the Rosh Tor might even be one of those. You could argue it with the spacing, but it's something that looks to be very ancient, and it looks like it could even be a halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai. But anyway, the point is that a lot of this is very exact with Kilayim, and a lot of it is just going to be known through either very, very old traditions or even halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai. Now, we have this 6 by 6 patch, and we have a border that's raised, says this Mishnah, and surrounds a 1 tefach high area. In other words, it's a little walking path that's elevated above the garden patch. And we know that where you have this now space that you've created, you can use that for creating setbacks. That means that on the other side of the patch that you can plant more stuff. So the question is going to be, if you're going to have the patch in the middle, you're going to have the patches on the other side of the walkway, how much can you plant? And the Gemara now is going to examine the ruling concerning this case. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Imi were sitting in studying, and they asked the following question. It says that we learned in our Mishnah, this one that we're dealing with now, that if the patch has a raised border surrounding it, and it's going to be 1 tefach high and 1 tefach wide, so that the total area of the garden patch is now going to be 8 by 8 tefachim, then it says that one may plant within it 13 species. In other words, it's going to be, says this Gemara, 3 on each border along the 6 by 6 patch and 1 in the middle, and that's going to be within the actual patch. So the Gemara, basically, according to the Mara Fulda, is going to be saying that in the first case of the Mishnah concerning the borderless patch without this walkway, the Mishnah rules that 5 species can be planted in the patch. So then why in this case where you have this elevated walking path border, why does the Mishnah rule that only 1 variety can be planted in this actual patch? So we saw before, without the walking path, that you can plant within it 5. You can plant 5 species within it, and that's going to be this trapezoidal part that we were talking about with an unplanted X in the middle, and right in the middle, that's going to be right there, is going to be 1 seed that's put in the middle, and basically this little patch is going to have an unplanted X shape, and you're going to have little trapezoids on the borders, and that's going to make 5. Now, how is it that we are not planting anything more within it? We're just planting 1 species. Before we were talking about 5 species, how did we get down to 1? And the Gemara says that, let the Mishnah teach that 5 varieties can be planted in the middle. so that, shouldn't it be that you can actually have 17 planted in the patch? In other words, that you're taking 5 in the middle, just like you had without the walking path, and you're taking the 12 that you can fit around this walking path, and you're saying, why are you talking about 13? Why not 17? So the Gemara is going to answer, and it's going to say, understand that the Mishnah's ruling is resulting from the fact that the species planted on the borders reduce the permitted planting area of the 6 by 6 tefach patch. In other words, it allows only one species to be planted there. And so what this is trying to say is that a patch with a border cannot be compared to one without the border. And the complete 6 by 6 patch is available for planting so that you can fit 5 species within there. But where you're surrounding it with this walking path border now, you can have 12 species that's going to be planted on the outside and 1 in the middle. And the complete 6 by 6 tefach area can't be used for planting. Why? There has to be a separation of 1.5 tefachim between the species on the border and the one in the patch. And so you have to reduce the available space of the patch from the middle from a 6 by 6 tefach area down to a 3 by 3 tefach area. Because you can't, this is going to be where, no more than one species is going to be allowed because you have to create these setbacks. In other words, if you have a 1 tefach border or walking path around the 6 by 6 little garden plot, the problem is you still always have to have this 1.5 tefach setback. So now when you're planting your 5 species in the middle, where you're having these little trapezoids like you had without the border, the problem is your 1 tefach area doesn't create enough space between what you're planting on the other side. So you have to shrink what's in the middle, and if you're shrinking what's in the middle, you can only fit 1 species within the middle. So that is why. Now the Gemara is going to challenge this, and keep in mind that we had a challenge in this Mishnah where one of the Tanaim looks like he's keeping a setback of only 1 tefach, not 1.5 tefach. So if you're going to go by the descent in the Mishnah, it's going to have a different geometry. So the Gemara challenges. It says that if it is because the species on the borders reduces the permitted planting area of the 6 by 6 tefach patch, then why then, concerning this very case, did we learn in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda says that 6 varieties can be planted in the middle, in other words, in this actual patch? So if you're going by Rabbi Yehuda's statement, it would look like you can use 6 within the middle. It looks like you should have 18 species that can be planted not only within the border, but also on the other side of the border. And the Gemara is basically going to be, asking and saying that if, the complete patch is not available for planting, how does Rabbi Yehuda allow for planting 6 different species there? And the Mara Fulda is going to be saying about this that the Gemara is assuming that Rabbi Yehuda argues that concerning a patch with a border, that even he's going to allow 6 species within the actual patch, not 1, so that there could be within the whole thing 12 species on the border and 6 within it, so a total of 18 species that are planted there. Tanakam is going to be saying 13. How do they get 13? They all agree that you're getting 12 on the border, and they're also going to be saying, the Tanakama says only 1 was going to fit. How do they get this difference? They are disagreeing about the difference between a 1 tefach setback and a 1.5 tefach setback. And also, Rabbi Yehuda is going to be allowing for a bet rova that's going to be here. In other words, I'm sorry, not a bet rova, a rosh tor. In other words, that he's going to be laying it out with these diamond shapes, and the Tanakama are not going to be allowing that. So that's how he's getting up to 18. Why? Because the walking path we already saw is 1 tefach wide, and he's requiring a 1 tefach distance between one variety and the other. Everybody agrees you can plant 12 on the other side of the border. Within the border, Tanakama says 1, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying 6. How is the 6 done by him. He says we don't need a 1.5 tefach border. We need a 1.5 tefach setback. We need a 1 tefach setback. And because you're talking about a 1 tefach walking path, there's your 1 tefach separator between species on the outside of the border and within the border. And within the border, he's going to be using the Rosh Tor triangular diamond-shaped pattern. So imagine 3 diamonds on the top row and 3 diamonds touching on the bottom row. That's how he gets 6. And everything, according to his geometry, is going to line up. And by the way, interestingly enough, Tanna Kama and the Gemara looks like you can't use the Rosh Tor for the vegetables. The Rambam, by the way, interestingly enough, is going to be saying that you can. I want to look at the Rambam's conversation about this because he actually has some good notes about this mishneh. The Rambam is going to allow for the utilization of the Rosh Tor formation to explain this mishneh. And, according to this, there's a simple reason why Rabbi Yehuda, according to the Rambam, does not differentiate between an ordinary patch and one without the border. And the Tanna Kama does. So, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the complete 6x6 patch is available even when surrounded by the border, since the species in the patch is going to form a Rosh Tor with a border. And so you have 6 little Rosh Tors going on within this patch. And according to the Tanna Kama, the 5 species is going to be in an arrangement that do not create a Rosh Tor with the border and has to be separated from the border. So the Tanna Kama is going to be saying that in order to do this without the border, you need to do these trapezoid formations. We're not using the Rosh Tor formation of these triangles or diamonds to pull this off. Rabbi Yehuda is allowing that. And so that's going to be the difference between doing 5 and doing 6, Rabbi Yehuda, and then Rabbi Yehuda is also going to be disagreeing. So 2 things here, right? Rabbi Yehuda and Tanna Kama disagree not only on the 1.5 tefach setback, but also can you use the Rosh Tor for this vegetable patch? And we looked at Rosh Tors for grain fields, but what about for a vegetable patch? So effectively, the Tanna Kama are saying no on the Yerukot and yes on the grain, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying yes to Rosh Tors for everything. That's how they're doing it. So in order to get the geometry for Rabbi Yehuda, he's using a 1 tefach setback, and he's also using, instead of the 1.5 tefach setback, and he's using the allowability of the Rosh Tor. And the Rambam himself is going to, talk about this, about what is the Gemara's question, and he's going to explain it like this. He's saying that as long as the species are separated by the required distance, even if it's planted in a Rosh Tor formation, there's no limit to the amount of species allowed within a 6x6 patch. So accordingly, the Rambam is going to be explaining that according to the Gemara here, we find the Tanna Kama's view difficult. That's what the Rambam writes. And he says, true that 5 species above that we're depicting before cannot be planted in a patch that's surrounded by a border, since the planting is going to reduce this to less than a 6x6 tefach area. Why? Because the walking path is only 1 tefach, and the sages require 1.5 tefachim. So you would have where there's not enough setback space. So in order to create the setback space with what's planted on the other side of the walking space, you have to shrink what's in the middle. So the idea here is that, according to the Rambam's explanation, Rabbi Yehuda says that you can do this in a Rosh Tor formation so that the 6x6 patch can be fully utilized, and that you can also have 12 species on the other side of the border, everything organized by the Rosh Tor in order to pull it off. Now, the Gemara is going to reject Rabbi Yehuda's comment over here. And the Gemara says, but if Rabbi Yehuda's comment, on the case discussed in the beginning of the Mishnah, how is it, says this Gemara, that concerning the ruling of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chia taught in Brisa, elaborating on this Mishnah as follows. It says that Rabbi Yehuda says that a total of 18 varieties of greens can be planted in a garden patch. Now, the idea here, says the Marafulda, is going to be the the possibility of planting 18 species does not exist in the Mishnah's first case of the ordinary 6x6 tefach patch. And clearly, according to Rabbi Hia's explanation of this, Rabbi Yudah, the Tana, is permitting 6 species, applying not only concerning the ordinary patch, but also going to be allowing for this patch with the border. So even then, you can have 6 species that you're always allowed to do in the middle, and then you can do the 12 species on the side. That's going to be 18. And so then the original question gets restated, and effectively is going to say why. The question goes like this, right? Here's the implied question. Why does Rabbi Yudah permit 6 species even when you're going to have a patch surrounded by the border, while the Tanna Kama is going to differentiate between a regular patch, where they're going to allow 5 species, and they're going to differentiate with a patch surrounded by a border, which they're going to allow 13 species. One, by the way, is going to be in the middle. And so this question here on why is it that Rabbi Yudah is going to be allowing 6 species and he's not going to differentiate between a patch with a border or without a border, that's going to be an unresolved question. That just leaves it unresolved. Now, the halacha is going to go by the Tanna Kama, but in order for us to understand the Tanna Kama's view deeply, we do want to understand the minority view. It helps us give us more clarity about the Tanna Kama's view. Why is it Rabbi Yudah is always going to be making 6 species in the middle, whether there's a patch there's a walking path border or not? And why is it that Rabbi Yudah always holds that there's no differentiation? That's the unresolved question. We just don't know. But nonetheless, we do know what the halacha is, and we do know that it's going to go by the Tanna Kama. Now, Gemara is going to give another series of questions on the Mishnah's ruling and the implied ruling here by the Mishnah regarding these small areas and the number of species you can plant within it. And it says, what is the law regarding to whether, one can clear out an area of land the size of the Bet Rova and plant within it 5 kinds of grain. So within the separation laws, the Bet Rova concerning grain is going to be, 6 by 6 tefachim. And basically, what this is trying to say is that, if you have an unplanted Bet Rova, that's going to be required between fields of grain, and an unplanted area of 6 by 6 is going to be, required between that and a field of vegetables, your coat. So the Gemara is going to be really asking the following question, says the Marafulda. And the Gemara is inquiring whether the ruling set forth in the Mishnah concerning planting many species is going to allow 5 species a year coat within this 6 by 6 tefach area, and if that's also going to apply to grain as well. We know that within grain, we know that some of the grains are going to be Kilayim with one another. So this Gemara is really, says the Chazan Ish, means 5 species of any seeds that are not categorized as a year coat. So that's going to be 5 other things. By the way, one part could be, say, wheat, and it could also be like barley and oats. Barley and oats are not Kilayim with each other because that's in the pairs that we saw in chapter 1. But what we're trying to see is, is this going to apply only to your coat or other things as well? So far, we were learning all of this for vegetables. But what about 5 other species of seed that are not categorized as vegetables? So the Gemara answers, says, if even in regard to a piece of land measuring 6 by 6 tefachim, for which one occurs lashes by Torah law when leaving less than that amount of space between fields of different species of Yerukot. And by the way, the Marafulda points out that an unplanted area of 6 by 6 tefachim is necessary between fields of Yerukot. And the Gemara here is assuming that this is a biblical requirement. And so the Marafulda explains that if one leaves less than this amount, he would incur lashes deraita for violating the biblical restriction of Kilayim. And that's basically what the Marafulda is saying. Now, the Rambam is going to be saying that concerning Yerukot, there's a prohibition, a biblical prohibition. It doesn't get transgressed unless two fields are within 1 tefach of each other. And so we saw this before, that some say that the 6 by 6 tefach area is going to be a d'oraita thing, and some are going to be saying that it's originally 1 tefach, but it was expanded d'Rabbanan to 6 by 6 tefachim. But some are going to say that, as the Rambam is pointing out, that the biblical requirement is just going to be 1 tefach. But others, like the Marafulda, are going to be saying that no, that even this Gemara is implying that the biblical requirement is a 6 tefach thing. So, the Gemara is basically saying, where are you going to be getting lashes if you've left less than this amount between, the different species of fields? And the Gemara is going to continue and say that you say that in our mishneh that it is nonetheless permitted to plant 5 species of your coat within that area. And then here, regarding a bet rova for which one does not incur lashes by Torah law, leaving less than that amount of space between the fields of different species of grain, Gemara says, is it not certain that 5 species of grain can be planted in that area? So the idea here, says Marafulda, about this is that on the biblical level, there's no difference between grain and vegetables. And in both cases, you have to have an area of 6 by 6 tefachim. That's going to be a space between these two. And if you left less than an amount, what this Gemara is saying is that you get lashes. And the requirement to separate fields containing different species of grain by leaving an unplanted area of a bet rova, it looks like it could be rabbinic. So that, if it was rabbinic, then if you failed to leave this setback, and if it were rabbinic, there would be no penalty of lashes. And so if it's going to be a d'oraita requirement, then there would be a requirement of lashes, because you broke something d'oraita that has the penalty of lashes. So the way the Vilna Goan is going to sum this up is going to say that concerning vegetables, 2 fields planted without a 6 tefach separation are considered intermingled on the biblical level, yet 5 species planted in smaller amounts are allowed within a patch of that very same 6 tefach area, provided that they are planted in a way that do not appear to be mingled and muddled together. So it follows, says the Vilna Goan, that concerning grains where 2 fields planted without a bet rova separation are going to be considered intermingled only on the rabbinic level, then surely 5 species planted in smaller amounts are allowed within an area of the very same bet rova size, provided that they're planted in a way that do not appear to be mingled. And about this, the Rosh Cirilio is going to say that the approach that could be used here would be using a rosh tor formation, and that's how you could pull this off with the 5 species of grains. And the other way to do this would be where you're doing these 1.5 tefachim setbacks. So over here, for this layout of 5 species of grain, you would also have the 2 approaches. And so this is related to Rabbi Yuda's argument with the Tana Kama, because they're both arguing whether you can use the rosh tor, and they're also arguing, which are going to be these triangles or diamond shapes. And, we know that everybody's going to be agreeing that you can use a rosh tor for grains, but you can't do it for vegetables. That's the maloket over there. So, according to, one way to look at this, if you're using the rosh tor formation, that's how you can pull it off with the grains. And another way to make this work would be if you're creating a separation of 2 amos, and then you've created this gap in the middle, and that's going to be another way to do that. So a lot going on here, and these are some of the harder laws in halacha, but they're worth getting into because it sharpens your mind. These are tools here that the sages put in to sharpen your mind, And it helps you understand the problems of this in a much deeper way. We know that there's a difference between how you're deriving the 1.5 tefach setback versus the 3 tefach setback, and why that is. We learned about that in the first part of the shiur. And it keeps coming back to the same theme that, no matter how deeply you're looking at this, we always have to plant and arrange this so it does not appear to be mingled. That's always the theme that is coming up. And whether, in fact, you can use the rosh tor on vegetables or not, really the idea is going to be that, are you planting it in a way where it appears mingled or not? And if it appears to be mingled, everybody agrees that you have a problem. Have a great day, and we'll do part 3 tomorrow.